to the millions who flock to it. It's an astounding spectacle.
It's a beautiful natural wonder, one of the wonders of the world.
It's hypnotic. If you're looking at the down at the bottom of the falls, it almost captures you.
To the engineers who harness it, it's an extraordinary power.
80-foot by 80-foot house would just be smashed into smithereens.
Niagara Falls became known as the power city of the world.
And to the rare breed who dare to defy it, it's the ultimate battle of man versus nature.
You get that rush going over the falls, folks. But you know, it'll kill you.
And all they found was one of his arms still attached to a leather strap with a tattoo on it.
Discover the turbulent forces that formed it, the future of its final destruction, and the secret of its irresistible allure for those who are defying Niagara. Niagara, a thundering geological giant. It's nature at its most beautiful and destructive. Niagara's breathtaking grandeur inspires awe and myth. Its power inspires ingenuity and industry. Yet the human experience exceeds its dizzying dimensions. For some, Niagara's pull is overwhelming, driving them to risk life and limb to conquer it. What secrets can we unlock in their stories? What forces them to the brink and beyond?
The feeling you have when you go over the falls, it's sheer horror. You know, it's scary stunt.
Powered by the Niagara River, fed by 4 of the Great Lakes, it's a 3-second, 16-story freefall, cascading over 5.5 million liters a second. Split by the jutting Goat Island, Niagara straddles 2 nations, converging 3 falls into one. On the U.S. side, the slicing water walls of Bridal Veil and American Falls. On the Canadian side, the famous Horseshoe Falls, over 6 football fields across, flanked by more than half a kilometer of killer rapids. And down below, a churning entrapment zone where 40-kilometer-an-hour currents pound into a pit so dangerous, no one knows how far it goes.
You could expect that there's about hundreds of pounds of force per square foot hitting at the bottom of the falls there. And in terms of what that could move, you know, it could probably move something that's the size of an 80-foot by 80-foot house would just be smashed into smithereens.
Throughout Niagara's history, the falls have both entranced and terrified. Iroquois tribes believe Niagara was home to Hino, their god of thunder. European missionaries first glimpsed Niagara in the 1600s. A priest described the falls as foaming, boiling, and more terrible than thunder. But it took a 19th century honeymoon visit from Napoleon's brother, Jerome Bonaparte, to turn Niagara into a newlywed Mecca. So popular as a romantic destination, it soon became known as the honeymoon capital of the world. Today, Niagara is a mega tourist destination. Each year, over 10 million visitors get as close to these pounding waters as they dare.
When you're on the water level at the base of the falls, on the Main of the Mist, to see all that water crashing down in front of you, it's just an unforgettable experience.
To engineers, taming Niagara's raging force means much more power. Since the first hydroelectric plant opened here in 1881, industrialists and engineers accomplished the impossible, harnessing Niagara. 7 power stations divert, corral, and maximize the water's raw energy. Operators redirect Niagara to flow through miles of man-made canals, tunnels, dams, and massive turbine-driven generators. The combined American and Canadian power system generates roughly 40 million megawatts of energy a year. Yet there is a darker side to Niagara's powerful draw. defiance.
Go, baby.
For thrill seekers, it's the ultimate challenge. A life or death battleground that matches wits, strategy, and daring against the most bone-crushing force nature can dish out.
You know, you're going up there to perform a stunt, not to get killed.
Only madmen, no, educated madmen would attempt something crazy like that.
You want to go over the falls and victory.
What began with tightrope walkers, solo flights, and acrobatic stunts changed forever in 1901 when schoolteacher Annie Taylor first went over in a barrel. Over the next 50 years, in contraptions both convoluted and complex, famous thrill seekers followed suit. Bobby Leach toured continents with his battered barrel. Jean Lussier built the first giant rubber ball. And famous multiple stunter and rescuer Red Hill helped turn the feat into a phenomenon. Modern-day stunters continue to push barrel technology and survival science to new heights. Yet some of Niagara's most intrepid risk-takers have paid the ultimate price. Their lethal legacy sends a dire warning. More than just illegal, defying Niagara can end in catastrophe. For one Niagara native, the call to conquer the falls was a boyhood fantasy, until his daredevil dreams collided head-on with one of Niagara's most dangerous threats, rocky cliffs crumbling into extinction.
Coming down about halfway down, we hit a rock, which is probably about the size of a house.
To understand the danger of Niagara's rocky cliff face, we have to look at the fall's violent past. After the last ice age, massive glaciers melted into the Great Lakes. Runoff pushed its way north from Lake Erie to Lake Ontario. It formed the 56-kilometer Niagara River. Along the way, the river hit a raised landmass called the Niagara Escarpment. The first falls were born. Thanks to powerful erosion, what started as a small 10.5-meter tumble has since gnawed its way 11 kilometers backwards, growing, carving, and cutting through earth and rock. Each day, Niagara continues to eat itself alive, working its way back to the Great Lakes, where it will eventually disappear, consumed by its own destructive force. For daredevils, it makes for perilously unstable geology.
The rock is not flat and smooth. There may be rocks jutting out, and your barrel comes and hits one of those rocks, it could smash to smithereens.
1989, two amateur thrill seekers, 42-year-old Peter DeBernardi and 24-year-old Jeffrey Petkovich, want to become the first two-man team to tackle the falls in a barrel built for two. Though they're about to risk their lives in a claustrophobic chamber, they've only known each other 8 weeks. Building a barrel big enough to safeguard two grown men is a tough test of engineering.
You know, it just grew as to how you got to get in this thing and be safe with it for what your specifications are.
The 3.5-meter-long, nearly 1.5-ton barrel becomes the heaviest in Niagara history. The build team knows the barrel's weight will make it ride low in the water, closer to jutting rocks. They reinforce the 1.5-meter diameter capsule with a 3-layer superstructure of steel and strong metal mesh. But even the strongest reinforcements are no guarantee. In Niagara's pulverizing waters, impact with any obstacle can be lethal. In addition, the men hope the colossal construction can help them avoid the fate of one of the worst tragedies in Niagara history. In 1951, Red Hill Jr. wrote a makeshift contraption he called the Thing, 13 inner tubes held together with canvas and fishnet. The flimsy barrel fell apart on the falls, the crashing waters and rocks ripping it to shreds. The daredevil's death was so gruesome, local lawmakers declared going over the falls officially against the law. But 38 years later, the law's no deterrent to Petkovich and DeBernardi.
Okay, boys, we'll see ya.
September 28th, the day of their attempt. Spectators look on as a launch truck arrives with the behemoth barrel on board and the two men harnessed head-to-head inside. The 15-person crew manhandles the barrel into Niagara's treacherous waters. It makes swift progress toward the brink. The men audio tape the ride. They crest the falls in seconds.
We're going down, Peter. We're going down.
Then, calamity. The barrel slams into a giant jutting mass halfway down the falls. As feared, it's one of Niagara's erosion-resistant rocks sticking out of the crumbling cliff face. Inside, the two men feel the shattering impact.
We hit a rock, which is probably about the size of a house. My face had hit the top of the barrel, which would have been the lower hatch. I was cut all up in here on the inside of my mouth.
The rock stays put as the men hit the mass with hundreds of pounds of force. The jagged boulder punctures holes in the barrel's exterior, but the design team's three-layered metal mesh structure prevents the rock from severing the capsule in two, and the men from almost certain death. The damaged capsule free falls, hitting the base pool. Water leaks dangerously into the punctured barrel. The men inside are in trouble.
At that point, there was so much water coming in, it was going all over your face. I thought that the water was coming in through the hatches.
We got drenched in. I'm soaked. I think it came into my valve, Peter, big time.
The team on shore struggles to drag the heavy vessel from the churning waters. Every maneuver matters.
They had a grappling hook, so they grabbed the barrel with the grappling hook.
We are okay. We are both okay.
90 minutes later, the metal monster's at the water's edge, in time for Petkovich to carry out his secret plan for an unforgettable finale.
I was there to do this thing naked. I had a cowboy hat on, a necktie, and I think I had cowboy boots on.
After their rescue, authorities arrest and fine the two men. They're lucky to be alive. Nearly 2 decades later, it's luck Jeff Petkovich and his family urge no one to put to the test.
Would I recommend you to do it? No, I wouldn't recommend you to do it because I have 2 young children. I wouldn't want my kids to do it.
For all who confront it, Niagara's collapsing, crumbling cliff face remains an unpredictable danger, proof of Niagara's violent past and its ongoing march towards its own destruction. In one of the most dangerous stunts in Niagara history, a young athlete plans to canoe over the falls. But in an effort to save him, police use Niagara's ultimate on-off switch.
We were going to lower the water in the river and try and somehow beach the craft.
Though it's hard to imagine, Niagara Falls can shut down. About a half a kilometer upstream from the falls stretches one of Niagara's most remarkable man-made feats, the Central Control Dam. In the 1950s, engineers built the dam to divert Niagara's waters to flow more evenly over the Canadian side. The mission was to maximize and control power. The result had an even greater impact, slowing erosion. Here's how. By raising and lowering the control dam's 18 separate hydroelectric-powered floodgates, operators moderate Niagara's water flow. By day, Niagara flows at 50% capacity. By night, 25%. Less water means less erosive power. So much so, Niagara's erosion has slowed from as much as 3 meters per year to less than half a meter per year. And when necessary, operators can actually cut the flow of water, reducing a roaring river to a trickle. It's a tactic law enforcement sometimes relies on to save stunters in distress. (1990). 28-year-old Jesse Sharp hopes to launch a career as a professional stuntman. He plans to row over the falls in a covered canoe, a boat similar to a kayak. Skilled kayakers have successfully braved the whirlpool rapids below, but no one has ever attempted the brink. Now, to succeed, Sharp must face a 51-meter sheer drop.
It was my understanding that he had visited this area many years previously and had practiced on some waterfalls down south where he was from. None of that can prepare you for Niagara Falls.
For his craft, Sharp carefully modifies a heavy-duty deck canoe. Wider and sturdier than a kayak, a deck canoe is more stable in violent waters. Plus, by crafting it so he sits upright with his legs folded underneath him, Sharp hopes to avoid one of the worst dangers, pulverizing his own limbs.
With a kayak, your legs are in a big plastic tube that can crush your legs. And with no legs, if you get in the water, then there's nothing you can really do. A lot of people have broken their backs going over large waterfalls in kayaks.
Conditioned athlete Jesse Sharp is aware of the extreme risks. He's also determined to succeed. For a full 7 years, he hones advanced techniques of boating over waterfalls. It's a risky practice, but on smaller scale falls, hydrologist Greg Pasternak sees ways it works.
If you're in a kayak, you can paddle fast enough that you can launch yourself out. So the water may have one trajectory and you have another one. And ideally, you could land and sort of skip your way off the water surface, or if you go down into the water, you'll just go down a few feet and then come right back out.
It's early morning on the day of Jesse Sharp's stunt. Two companions videotape his attempt from shore. Sharp hits the choppy Canadian rapids half a kilometer above the brink, allowing ample time to build momentum. Sharp powers his way downstream. River police spot a lone boater headed for trouble. They immediately put a plan in motion to stop him.
We were going to make arrangements to try and get someone to go out, lower the water in the river, and try and somehow beach the craft and then go out and get them.
Niagara engineers can dramatically cut the roaring water flow by raising strategic dams. The system controls power output and slows erosion. But in an emergency, it can also help stop fatal accidents before they happen. But now, dam operators and police are caught in a race against a stunter on a mission.
Well, it takes anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes to lower the water level anywhere from 6 to 10 feet. And when we saw this guy in the river, it was like he was going down a slalom course skiing. He was actually using his paddles to go around the rocks.
Authorities have no way to stop the water in time. They can only watch as Sharp crests the brink.
He had a really calm look on his face, almost a smile, and he was twirling the paddle over his head.
But the sheer distance of Niagara's 51-meter drop turns his plan and vessel tragically upside down.
As soon as it loses its speed, what happens is it's just going to start to, tumble end over end. And imagine like if you take a feather and you drop a feather does not fall straight down. A feather tends to go like this and do all sorts of crazy loops and things. And so a kayak is sort of the same thing.
It's likely Sharp's boat somersaulted through the plunging waters. If Jesse Sharp was still alive as he hit bottom, he was powerless to stop his fate, crashing down with the force of a head-on collision.
It's basically just random luck as far as what position you are in when you hit the water. With the barrel, it's probably less important what the position of the barrel is compared to something like a kayak.
To this day, his body's never been found. The kayak was recovered with a little dent in it, but his body has never been found.
Powerful man-made dams may help stem Niagara's raging flow. But in the end, Jesse Sharp's tragic story stands as a reminder. Niagara Falls is never truly under our control. One repeat Niagara daredevil is determined to outdo himself. But a close call near the deadly entrapment zone leads to a life-threatening rescue operation.
And I said, no. Well, if we run out of oxygen, we're gonna have to open that cap, water come in or not.
The only match for the destructive power of Niagara's crashing waters above is the colossal churning cauldron below. In fact, the area called the entrapment zone is so dangerous, scientists can only guess how far down it goes. Some say the Earth gradually slopes to the riverbed. Others say there's a plunge pool as deep as the falls are high. One thing everyone agrees on. In this brutal basin, water currents boil in an endless circular motion known as the washing machine effect.
The water comes over the falls and then it hits the pool at the bottom. When it does that, then the water goes underwater and it's going to form two different rollers, we call them. One roller will be heading upstream and hitting into the face of the rock. The other roller will wash down, probably hit the bed, and then skirt off heading downstream.
What people don't realize is that they think that once the water comes over the falls, it just floats out. Well, it doesn't. It actually has a reverse spin, and it traps you in behind the falls.
Notorious thrill seeker Steve Trotter first made Niagara history in 1985. At age 22, becoming the youngest person ever to go over in a barrel. Trotter's success and dramatic videotape landed him on national television.
So, people like, that looks like you up there with Johnny Carson. I go, yeah, it's me.
A decade later, the stuntman's obsessed with upping the ante with an even more historic first.
June 18th, 9:10, I will be going over the brink of the falls.
Accompanied by friend Lori Martin, they'll be the first man-woman team to defy Niagara.
Lodge, you guys in the truck?
Yeah. Billy, do you ever walk the talkie to go down that way?
I have one in my bag.
The construction team fuses two metal water heaters together to build the his and her barrel. They install elaborate safety belts, and for a high-tech touch, Trotter lines the vessel with an unusual packing material.
It's like memory foam. It's warhead packing, missile packing. You don't want to be moving a lot inside that barrel because the initial hit, you're falling at like 82 to 85 miles an hour to a dead stop. You know, it'll jar you up. It'll break your bones.
Finally, Trotter adds oxygen tanks, but deciding how many tanks to carry in the narrow capsule is a critical dilemma with high stakes.
Everything's in go.
Daredevils must plan to keep breathing beyond the jump if they get stuck in the entrapment zone.
If you get stuck behind the falls, it's a bad spot to be in.
And you could stay there forever. You may never get out.
Steve Trotter and Lori Martin are all too aware of the entrapment zone's lethal history. In 1930, George Staticus was its unlucky victim.
And it's George Staticus's death barrel, as they say. He actually suffocated. He was stuck here for 18 hours. And when they took him out of the barrel, when they finally took him out, there was no water in his lungs. He had just suffocated.
Anybody that's in there for longer than 4 hours, if they don't have an oxygen support system or some breathing apparatus to assist them in there, they're going to be in a lot of trouble.
June 18th, 1995, the day of Trotter and Martin's jump.
Come on, we need somebody back here! Push!
A 12-person launch team pushes them in. They enter the falls near the brink, unaware they're headed for peril.
There goes the barrel, there it goes.
There it is! There it goes, there it goes!
Look at that!
The barrel hits bottom. It resurfaces, but the circular churning entrapment zone has a different danger in store. Its strong currents force the duo into a remote rocky outcrop, stuck. Water crashes down around them. The trapped barrel becomes a prison. The longer they spend inside, the worse their chances of survival.
We were running out of air, and Lori, I'm just like holding the cap shut because it was banging. And I was telling Lori, it's so hot in here, I gotta let you. Don't you open that cap, Steve Trotter, don't you open that cap, we're gonna drown. I said, no, well, if we run out of oxygen, we're gonna have to open that cap, water come in or not. And when you open your cap at the bottom of the falls, the water rushes in so hard. I mean, it's cold water, it's scary, real scary deal.
Trotter and Martin are stuck nearly 60 jagged, slippery meters at the bottom of Niagara's rocky cliffs. Their position makes them almost impossible to access. To get out alive, they'll need a rescue operation from an elite crew called the High Angle River Team.
The first thing that has to be done is we have to locate the victim. Sometimes it'd be quite difficult. Once they have been located, we'll want to get people to them, assess their situation, give them first aid, and then transfer them out.
Firefighters, police officers, rescue personnel all have to be involved. It's time and it's money and it's very dangerous. If you've been down below the falls at any one point in time, you will see that it's wet, it's slippery, it's cold, and it's quite treacherous.
For Rescue Team Coordinator John Gader, Niagara's extreme conditions are part of the job.
Some of the challenges that we face here are the weather, also some very rugged terrain here. We have a very deep gorge here.
Dangerous Niagara rescue ops often require land, water, and air team coordination. The High Angle River Team practices advanced techniques and drills worst-case scenarios.
Rescue scenarios here involve overdue hikers or injured hikers. But because of the terrain, they're unable to rescue themselves. So we have to go down and find them and get them out.
In this exercise, a kayaker has abandoned his craft in the frigid rapids. He's dehydrated, exhausted, and fighting fatal hypothermia.
Locating the victim is usually the largest hurdle that we have to overcome.
The land crew moves in to secure the boater's exact position. It's clear they'll need backup by water.
We will have people on shore that can assist, but he will have to be taken out to the jet boat and taken to advanced medical care.
The team's high-powered jet boats can cut through Niagara's choppy Class 4 and 5 rapids, classifications measuring difficulty and danger. But even for this well-equipped team, the slightest mistake can cost the victims or a crew member's life. They secure, harness, and lift the victim to an aquatic stretcher, administering life-saving emergency medicine. Now, to save Steve Trotter and Lori Martin, the team faces a test that's all too real. The hazardous rescue gets underway. Trotter and Martin endure an hour and a half in the stifling chamber. The ordeal pushes them to the breaking point.
It was so loud you can hardly hear yourself think. The bottom of the falls, it's like being right in front of a freight train. Freight trains flying by and you're just sitting there.
And Trotter and Martin have no way of knowing how fast help will come.
All my communication went out. I couldn't talk to my crew chief, so I didn't know where I was.
Worst of all, Trotter only planned for 4 hours of oxygen, allowing the daredevils 2 hours each. As the rescue team risked their lives rappelling down to the churning waters, every minute counts. At last, after nearly 2 hours of dangerous backbreaking work, rescuers secure the barrel for opening. Amazingly, Lori Martin has only minor injuries.
I'll never do it again.
Steve Trotter needs hospital treatment for a spinal injury. The fight for their lives is over, but their fight with law enforcement's just begun. Authorities charge Trotter and Martin with trespassing and performing a stunt without a permit. They also fine them for their stunting. Imprisoned for several days until they can pay their fines, Trotter and Martin become the first Niagara daredevils to serve real jail time.
It was $4,700 for Lori Martin to get out of jail, so do the right thing, get her out first. And then I had to raise up another $5,000. All my bartender friends in Fort Lauderdale had canisters on every bar and all over town.
Steve Trotter claims to this day his own private crew could have saved the thrill-seeking pair. But for police, the stunt and perilous rescue stand as a vivid example of the far-reaching impact and danger of willfully plunging over Niagara Falls.
It's one thing if an accident happens and you go over the falls through no fault of your own, but when you deliberately go over the falls, now you risk your life, but more importantly, you risk people who have other things, better things to do. You risk their lives as well.
Trotter and Martin got out in time, but Niagara's base pool remains a churning cauldron of unfathomable currents. Its dreaded entrapment zone can turn into a burial ground in an instant. In its stunt-filled history, only one Niagara thrill-seeker remains as mysterious as he was determined. But a clash with Niagara's killer rapids turns his careful plan to chaos.
And I looked up and I said, oh my God, I'm dead.
Few features of Niagara's rugged terrain strike more fear than the rapids just hundreds of feet above Goat Island. These violent waters mark exactly where and how Niagara Falls is carving out its future. The flowing river is slowly wearing away at the hard limestone surface crust. The process is steady but uneven. The result? Rocks poking up like jagged teeth and a riverbed pockmarked with craters. One of the worst of these craters hides above the brink. Here, water speeds up with the sudden drop, crashing even faster over the edge. For those who've experienced this treacherous stretch, only one nickname will do: the Killer Rapids.
And once you're in the Killer Rapids, it's like being in a cement mixer. You really jostle every which way. Or maybe a pinball machine.
1961. Daredevil William Fitzgerald arrives at Niagara Falls planning to take the plunge under the alias Nathan Boya. He's motivated by deep personal reasons he shares with no one. Fitzgerald intends to perform the stunt and escape back into anonymity.
But they wouldn't know who I was, and they wouldn't know anything about my story or why I did it. And that was the plan.
Fitzgerald borrows his ball-shaped design concept from 1928 Daredevil Jean Lussier. He dubs it the Plungosphere. To build it, Fitzgerald alternates rubber and steel layers and crowns the almost 2-meter diameter sphere with a submarine hatch. Finally, Fitzgerald installs birdshot ballast, or bottom weighting. This ballast is a must for the Plungosphere to stay upright in the falls, but it's a design feature with a notorious history. For infamous 1920s Niagara stunter Charles Stevens, ballast design took a fatal toll.
At his feet, he had an anvil and some lead weights. He did that in order to make the barrel go through the rapids above the falls upright, so his head wouldn't be knocked down on the rocks below. He had his arms attached inside the barrel to leather straps. When it went over, it fell apart,
and all they found was one of his arms still attached to a leather strap with a tattoo on it.
July 15th, William Fitzgerald's launch day. To escape police and tourist detection, Fitzgerald plans to launch almost 6.5 kilometers upstream. He's counting on the necessary ballast and his barrel's spherical shape to maximize buoyancy and ride high in the water, safely above the rocky Killer Rapids. Strapped into his Plungosphere, using his alias Nathan Boya, the Daredevil's ready for the riskiest ride of his life. A hired local team tows the ball into the Canadian side waters. At first, the steel sphere floats smoothly.
I felt very calm. I was certain that I had solved every problem. So I had no stress whatever.
But before he reaches the brink, catastrophe. Hitting the choppy Class 6 Killer Rapids above Niagara's Canadian side Horseshoe Falls, Fitzgerald's in grave danger.
So I was knocked from boulder to boulder. And evidently there's a drop there too, something like 50 feet. and I made that drop, smashed into a boulder. I bounced in the air and came back down.
Fitzgerald's battered by the rocky riverbed, but he has no way to stop the plungiosphere's progress. He nears the brink, wrestling with his own barrel, fighting desperately for his life.
When I came down, I found that the ball had been knocked out around, and that's evidently when I got that big dent. And it was knocked out around to such an extent that the top began to come loose. And that's when I really got scared. I was terrified because I knew then that that top probably wouldn't hold.
His badly dented craft crests the falls, hitting the base pool in seconds. Ironically, an earlier design feature now works too well, putting the daredevil in even more serious danger.
I went down upside down, but I had ballast, about 150 pounds of birdshot in the bottom of it. And this was up on the top now. And it righted itself violently, and in righting itself, the water ripped the hatch out of my hands and just flew off. It just pulled the top right out of my hands. I just couldn't hold it. And I'm down there, and I looked up and I said, "Oh my God, I'm dead," is what I remember saying that. I could see nothing but blue haze. And at any moment, I expected the falls to pour in on me and drown me.
But a different design principle saves him, the sphere's high-riding buoyancy.
Once you're out of the roller zone, then what happens to you? I mean, you're not free yet. You gotta still get out of the river. You don't want to go down the gorge either, so you want to get out quick, and being buoyant then would be very helpful.
The ailing plungiosphere floats to safety. A passing tourist takes the only existing photograph, shortly before authorities capture and fine the mastermind inside. For nearly 50 years, the mystery of Nathan Boya endured.
He did tell reporters later that someday before he died, he would let it be known why he really did it. Well, I'm waiting, Mr. Fitzgerald.
For the first time ever, William Fitzgerald reveals his secret reason: a broken engagement, painful repentance for a tragic love affair gone wrong, and a tribute to a Niagara Falls honeymoon which never was.
I didn't want to gain anything from it. No fame, no fortune, nothing at all. This was for her, for what I had done to her, the fact that I had ruined her life.
Whatever their motivation, one thing's certain: the uneven, eroding terrain of Niagara's killer rapids can turn any plunge into a fight for survival. A seasoned multiple stunter, the purest old-fashioned barrel. But the unpredictable waters of Niagara's 51-meter freefall almost take his life.
This is where we went in right here.
Yeah, and then we came right over here.
Yep. And the thing that got me was how deep it is down from there.
Oh yeah, it goes fast.
For daredevils, tackling Niagara's 3-second drop is a matter of life and death. For hydrologists, it's an intriguing natural phenomenon. How exactly does the water fall and why? Do currents behave differently at different points along the brink? Essentially, the way flowing water behaves comes down to two basic factors: what the water encounters on its way towards the brink, and what, if anything, it encounters on the way down. Water has very low internal friction, or viscosity. As long as it stays self-contained, it moves quickly. But if it hits any obstacle, such as riverbank rocks or cliff-face debris, water reacts, adjusting its course. It's a simple principle with huge consequences, carving the Canadian Falls into a giant geological spout.
So the water is always the fastest in the center, It's the deepest, fastest part of the flow. And that also contributes to why there's a horseshoe shape that's associated with the shape of the center of the channel.
Multiple stunters like Dave Munday use different assault tactics to navigate Niagara's volatile waters. No daredevils made more attempts in history than Munday. 4 assaults in total, each time using a different strategy. In his first attempt in 1985, Munday hoped to avoid police detection by launching about 1.5 kilometers upstream, but authorities nabbed the daredevil before he reached the brink. It's only the beginning of a standoff between Munday and Niagara law enforcement.
The police were hard at wall. It took me years to get by them. They're on constant watch, constant watch.
Yeah, I prosecuted Dave Munday 3 times.
So I was terrified of Fred Hollage. He was a police officer that was firm, You know, he was, you better look, I'm going to get you.
Police are trained to stop any suspicious activity above the falls, but if a stunter goes over, their mandate is simple.
Our main objective would be to prosecute the individual that went over in the barrel and seize the barrel.
Penalties are designed to act as deterrents.
We insisted on the legislation being changed, which it was, and made it now more expensive, maximum fine of $10,000, and of course forfeiture of your apparatus that you used to commit the stunt.
Yet some daredevils refuse to give up. In his second successful plunge in 1985, Munday captured first ever barrel's eye view footage. He also used a launch tactic pioneered a few years earlier by daredevil Carl Socek, a fast side approach Socek dubbed the assault on the brink.
The key with going over the side is that they're going to decrease the amount of force, and most importantly, they're going to decrease the likelihood that you're going to get sucked in towards the center of the horseshoe.
But in his third attempt in 1990, Munday struck out again, this time falling prey to a different water flow factor: volume.
In terms of how much water there is, the difference is how far out are you pushed. If you have less water, you're more likely to fall straight down. So the more water you have, you're more likely to stay with the water and launch farther out into a safer area.
Launching early in the morning, Munday thought he'd have sufficient water volume. But in these dam-controlled currents, operators had Niagara flowing at only 25%. Spotting the stunter, authorities quickly cut the volume even lower. A crane operator worked to rescue him as the stranded Munday teetered dangerously for over an hour. 1994, Munday plans his 4th attempt. He faces his toughest challenge yet, silencing old-fashioned stunt purists who criticized an earlier barrel as too sophisticated to be daring.
People came along and said I had a high-tech barrel. Well, there was no high-tech barrel. I know nothing about building a barrel.
To quash any possible criticism of design or execution, Munday plans a hazardously high-risk, old-fashioned plunge. For his low-tech barrel, he and crew chief Dan Perry outfit a 1.5-meter, 300-kilogram diving bell with the simplest breathing apparatus imaginable. Mechanical air valves cut into the diving bell's sides. The valves open or close from inside, letting in outside air. In addition, Munday refuses to carry oxygen tanks. But one of the greatest dangers Dave Munday faces is in his head. The daredevil suffers from an ironic phobia, a fear of water.
I just don't know how to swim. I still don't, you know. Even in the shower, I can't I can't breathe when I have a shower.
September 26th, the day of Dave Munday's 4th plunge arrives. The crew pulls up at the brink. They roll the diving bell off the launch truck with Munday inside. It hits water in a sudden splash. Tourists watch the diving bell's progress, unaware Dave Munday's plunging towards his worst nightmare. He he plummets down the Canadian Falls horseshoe flank, exactly as planned. Spectators watch the barrel hit bottom, oblivious to a horrible reality. Inside the painted steel sphere, Munday's knocked unconscious.
Well, from the shock of the impact, the water, you hit that water, you know, bang, and it knocked them out.
Go, Frank.
For a chilling 18 minutes, there's no signal from the daredevil. His barrel floats in eerie silence.
During that entire time, his crew was trying to raise him on the radio. Dave, can you hear us? Can you hear us, Dave? If you're down there, please answer. Not knowing whether he was alive or dead.
Even more disturbing, the breathing valves cut into the sides of Munday's barrel remain shut. Yet there are no oxygen tanks on board. Terrified of water coming in as he fell, Munday shut the valves during the plunge, a casualty of his severe phobia.
In the ball, I never opened the air valve. When it rolled in, it kind of stunned me a little bit, and I didn't open the air valve up, and then I just ran out of air in the ball. Yeah, I just fell asleep. I can't tell you much about that.
And then he was unconscious, so he couldn't open the taps.
We felt that he could possibly survive the trip over Niagara Falls and subsequently suffocate in the barrel.
Munday's crew watches on shore. The vessel eddies out of reach. They can only wait and hope.
Well, you never know where it's going to go. You just got to sort of wait and see what happens, and then decide what to do to get him out.
The barrel's valves stay shut, but at last, a barely coherent Munday radios. He's sick and getting weaker inside. Classic symptoms of carbon dioxide poisoning. The situation grows desperate as the daredevil floats aimlessly in the churning currents. Lucky for Munday, surprise help arrives in the form of a tugboat operated by Niagara's popular tour guide fleet, the Maid of the Mist. The tugboat hooks the barrel and tows Munday to shore. Dan Perry rushes to assist his daredevil friend. He has no idea what he'll find inside.
The barrel was pulled horizontally, and Danny Perry, the crew chief, reached in and took him under the arms and pulled him out like a child.
When I first pulled him out, like out of the round barrel, he was like, he wasn't talking, he was out. And then he started walking, and he's good.
I have never seen a person's face as white as his face was. He was that traumatized and shocked by the impact.
Police immediately apprehend Munday, who pays a $10,000 fine for his fourth stunt, a stiff penalty for someone who refuses to call himself a daredevil.
I got in a cylinder, and them guys doing all the work. I didn't do anything. They put me in, they got me out. I just laid there and went over the falls.
But for thrill seekers like Dave Munday, in the plummeting waters of Niagara's unpredictable 16-story drop, getting out alive is the toughest work of all. A natural wonder, a hydroelectric phenomenon, a daredevil's death-defying stunt. For all who revere its breathtaking beauty, exploit its power, and risk everything to defy it, encounters with Niagara only fuel its allure. And as this geological giant marches towards its destiny, we are awestruck and lucky to be along for the ride.
It's hypnotic. It almost captures you.
You want to try to take your life by doing something stupid like this, and you know, obviously I didn't look at it that way. If I did, then I would have never done it. It's the Niagara Falls.